Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the DGS Presents YouTube channel. Today is just kind of a quick episode. I thought I would look at a obscure or somewhat obscure Doctor Who RPG that came out in 1991 from Virgin Publishing called Timelord. Now, this book, which again came out in 1991, is part of the old series, right? And you see the Seventh Doctor on the cover there, Sylvester McCoy. So this is going back some time, years ago, and I think it came after the FASA Doctor Who that came out, I believe, in the 1980s, which we'll talk about in a different episode. But I really love this one because it's kind of this rules light, fun comprehensive RPG that's all wrapped up into one book. The authors were Ian Marsh and Peter Darvell Evans. And the first 30 pages of this, which we'll look at in a second, contain the kind of the history of Doctor Who. There's like a timeline, essentially, of the show and the doctors and events and this kind of thing. And then we also have your obligatory description on how to conduct a role-playing game, or what a role-playing game really even is. And then, interestingly enough, on page 12 of the text, there is a short story that illustrates a typical adventure called The Necromancers, which is kind of fun to read. I don't know if the full story is in there. It looks to be like a snippet of a larger story. If someone knows where that came from, or if that's like in a novel or something, please mention it in the comments below for sure. In this game, the GM is called the referee. And then in the book, we have a demonstration of a solo adventure, which is kind of like broken into these kind of modules. And the people that you're playing in the solo adventure are Tegan and Jamie, the Doctor's Scottish friend. And the book kind of leads you through step by step, a little mini adventure, and kind of demonstrates how the rules work. Just to get you acclimatized to the game before going into the rules heavy. On this picture here, we see some stats for Jamie and Tegan, but it's a little easier if I bring up, for instance, from the text, the Sixth Doctor sheet to give you an illustration of what the characters actually look like in terms of attributes and characteristics and wound levels and this kind of thing. In the rules, there are 8 abilities that are common to all characters, as you see on that sheet there: strength, control, size, weight, move, knowledge, determination, and awareness. And each of these abilities has a value of between 1 and 6, with 1 being very somewhat incapacitated or very lightly trained, to 6 being, among the best in the world in that given attribute. Special abilities are based off of these core abilities, such as marksmanship and first aid and this kind of thing, and that would be added to your modifier when you're rolling to do something. There is a PDF that's floating around out there. This is basically a condensed version without any pictures or anything of the Time Lord rules. I have here, for instance, the actual Time Lord text. You see, it's not too big. You can get this like on Amazon or eBay for relatively inexpensive. It's not an expensive book, and you really have everything that you need in here. There are some. I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. There were some kind of fan created material and semi-official stuff. For instance, like this, the Time Lord Journeys, which I think is from 2003. And has some additional rules and clarifications and fun things that you can do with the game. I think clearly it still has an audience and people are still playing it, or at least, back in 2003. Character generation, for instance, you can build your own characters, or as is a little more typical for this particular game, is selecting pre-existing characters from the dossier that's inside the book. And typically you're going to want to play a doctor, right? Or at least one of the doctors, and then one of his companions or multiple companions, this kind of thing. There's also this Timelord Companion Express Edition that came out, which also has some supplementary material. So I haven't really looked through these very deeply. I have looked through the main text, and I did play the main game way back in like 1991, 92, because I'm like a huge Doctor Who fan, especially primarily of the old series. I really love the old series. I grew up with the Fourth Doctor. I also love the Fifth Doctor. I thought he was great, and just had so much fun watching the show. So I really wanted to play the game. So anyway, back to the rules really quick. Let me pull up this, and I'm not going to flip through all the rules in here, but I'm going to kind of condense things and make them pretty easy to figure out. Now, this game is based off a special dice mechanic, and it's called Beat the Difference. And this is very innovative and very different because I haven't seen it in any other game before. And let me kind of describe it. So in this game, we have 2d6s, right? We're using 2d6s. And when we're doing this dice mechanic, we roll both of them and we find the difference. The lower roll is subtracted from the higher. We are not adding the dice together. So keep that in mind for a moment. In the game, the referee will determine how difficult a task is to complete, and he or she will assign a value of 0 to 10. I'll talk more about how to assign those in a moment. He or she will then compare the value with the player's skill to see the difference. So, for instance, cracking a complex computer code is difficulty 9, and the Seventh Doctor, if we look at him, he has a cryptoanalysis total of 8. So he has knowledge 7, which is extremely high because he's a Time Lord, plus 1 in cryptoanalysis. So those are the numbers that we would be working with. Now, a character whose ability is greater than the difficulty number automatically succeeds at the task he or she is trying to accomplish. But back to Beat the Difference. If the difficulty is equal to or greater than the character's ability, he or she must roll to beat the difference. So when trying to beat the difference, you're trying to beat the difference between the assigned difficulty and the character's combined score if they have something to combine. Now, sounds a little confusing, but it's very easy to figure out. Here's an example, and it comes from the book. Tegan and Nyssa must jump a chasm. Right? So they're running, and they're going to jump over this chasm, and the difficulty of doing that is 4. Now we're going to use the control stat for these characters. You could, in some cases, I think like Ace and maybe some of the other characters have like leaping ability, so they might have like get a bonus there. But let's say for this example, both Tegan and Nyssa have control of 4. But Nyssa has a penalty of 1 because she's in unsuitable shoes. I don't know, like high heels or something. So Tegan rolls a 3 and a 1. We subtract the 1 from the 3 to get a 2, and this beats the difference of 0. Right, remember, it was difficulty 4. She has control of 4, so the difficulty was 0. Now everybody says, well, wouldn't she automatically always succeed? No, because she has to beat, not meet, the difference. And in the example in the book, Nyssa realizes that's going to be a little tough to jump over that chasm, so she takes off her high-heeled shoes so she doesn't get the penalty, which would be assigned by the referee. Now, starting on page 211 in the text, there's a list of difficulty numbers according to abilities listed. I think in the PDF, it's like on page like 146 or something like that. It's going to take me a while to get there. But so the difficulties are basically in accordance with the attributes. So, for instance, strength of 4 would be a strong adult. Knowledge of 7 indicates understanding of interstellar navigation or alien technology, right? Things that are necessary to operate the TARDIS, for instance. So yeah, I'm not going to flip all the way through here. It's way deep in the book, but there's a big list of all kinds of difficulty numbers for different tasks and that kind of thing. So moving on here, let's go to time and movement. So in this game, time is measured in turns, and there's two different kinds. There's action turns, which last for a few seconds, and then there's research turns, which will last for 15 minutes or more. So when the doctor's working on something like some sort of research, he's trying to figure out some alien technology or something really complex, it would be in research turns. Action turns would be like for combat and standard actions. Now, we also have the way that the game is broken up in terms of spaces or distances. And this is kind of interesting in this game because they're broken up in these kind of 10-centimeter areas in terms of on your table called areas, and they're almost like Post-it notes put together. And I have a picture of that here. Let's put this up. This is from the sample adventure that's actually in the book. It's this Curse of the Cyclops. And here you see how the maps are arranged. It looks very different than D&D, right? We don't have like a, graph paper or a hex grid or anything like that. Everything is kind of divided into these areas. And movement is based on, through these areas, is based on the character's movability, which is typically 3. So a normal human has like the ability to move through 3 areas. But for the first Doctor, if you're physically impaired or you're elderly, as in his case, his movement is only 2. Each area of movement increases the difficulty by 1, and moving beyond 3 areas will require a beat the difference roll. So you're kind of running, right? It's kind of like a challenge. Terrain can modify this and introduce obvious penalties to your movement. Now, you can move less than your move score and perform another action. So, for instance, if Ace wants to hit the Cyberman with her baseball bat and he's in another area, she can do that. So that brings us to actual combat. And combat in this game is pretty straightforward. The referee actually decides the order of attack. So we don't really have a formal initiative system. It basically says that the referee just uses his or her determination and judgment to figure out who acts first and in what order. When we are engaging in combat, we're using our control attribute plus any special combat abilities. So here's a good example. Leela, her abilities are control. She has control 5 as a base, but she has edged weapons 2 and archery 1. Her ability to attack in close combat would be 5 if she strikes with her fist. Her ability is 7 if she strikes with an edged weapon, such as her knife. And it's 6 if she shoots a crossbow in ranged weapons combat. And of course, that would be modified by range. So her attack is respectively 5, 7, and 6. Now, a target's defense value is his size, and ranged weapons, again, will add a modifier based on distance. So it's kind of strange, but you're going against someone's size. Now, dodging allows a character to add his control to his size to generate a higher difficulty number. So if you have special evasive maneuvers or whatever, and it's in accordance with control, you can elect to dodge rather than attack. And then once you have that, that's a new difficulty number. It makes you obviously a lot more difficult to hit. Wounds. The number of physical harm that any attack does to a target is measured in wounds. And again, different weapons, right? Guns and knives, swords, whatever, will have different damage ratings. And when a character hits an opponent in combat, he inflicts the number of wounds appropriate to the weapon he or she is using. Leela, for instance, inflicts 4 wounds with her knife if she beats an opponent's defense. And she inflicts 2 wounds, half her strength of 5, rounded down if she just uses her fists. And her bolts fired from her crossbow inflict 4 wounds each. Now we also have, there's a number of, like we see Ace here, there's all kinds of rules for like explosives and grenades and this kind of thing, different damage values based on those in the book. It's very straightforward. Now, what about armor? Now, all the damage gets through. It injures the target if the number of wounds is greater than the protection of the armor. Now, if the number of wounds is equal to or less than the protection of the armor, the attacker then needs to beat the difference between these values to wound the defender. Very straightforward, same mechanic that we saw before. And then there's a number of rules for aiming, grappling, explosive use, like I said. And with healing, it's pretty straightforward. You can gain back wound points naturally based on your strength value over time, like for instance, within a week. You can also seek medical attention or get first aid to get back those wound points. Now, the game, of course, has a big dossier of characters and companions that you can select from.
Do you fancy a quick trip round the 12 galaxies and then back to Perivale in time for tea? But there are 3 rules. 1, I'm in charge.
Whatever you say, Professor.
2, I'm not the professor, I'm the doctor.
So, one complaint that some people have with the Doctor Who games is, the person playing the Doctor is going to have the most fun. Well, there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, you can play, like, for instance, the companion Nyssa, who has all kinds of cool special abilities in that she herself has that she can contribute to an adventure. Obviously, Ace with all her combat abilities. You can, there's Adric is in there if you want a mathematician. The Masters are in the book. All the Doctors are in the book. They just look like this, and they have different slight variations and abilities and character features between them. And really, the best way really to tackle this is get good companions, get a doctor, and go. And the game can be a lot of fun. Again, it's super rules light. It's all in one volume. It's not difficult to figure out. And it's just it's good old school Doctor Who gameplay. So that's all really I had for today, guys. Just a real quick look at this Timelord game. I promised my people, my Facebook group, I would take a look at this, so I decided to do it tonight before I went out. And I will see you next time. Not sure what I'm going to do next time. We'll grab something off the DGS shelf, and we will play that. So good seeing you, and I will see you guys soon.